feel, Lenny, to have people watching this, something that you've been working on for such a long time?
Great. It feels great to have it out in the world. I mean, you spend so long, I think, because this one just seemed to take a long time, because we started talking about it. Well, actually, it predates Normal People because it existed. Emma will
I've been
tell you
working on
about
it
that.
since 2017, so
Yeah.
it's been a while.
And the idea of doing it for television came post Normal People, and then process of adaptation, and then COVID and delay. And so by the time we actually shot it and cut it, and it just feels like it's only real when it gets in front of an audience. And there's always a sort of big, huge sigh of relief and a sense of completion when that happens. So I think we're all pretty happy.
There's so much trust, you know already there's so much trust between you and Sally Rooney because of Normal People and how you dealt with the adaptation. So when you do have her wonderful words in front of you, how on earth do you start to translate that into something? Because it's all from the perspective of Frances, which makes the job even harder. So tell us about your initial decision making in terms of the perspective that we see on the screen.
I mean, so it's sort of a little detail about it is that we started trying to develop it as a feature film. That was our first attempt. And that sort of, we were already kind of wrestling with the kind of perspective thing, but it was only when it started to break into the kind of 12, we changed tack and went into the 12 episodes, that you realised just how significant the taking away of the kind of internal voice was going to be on two fronts. One, in terms of understanding Frances, but also then the kind of repositioning of your perspective about the other characters. So the sort of simple kind of breaking of, that's not simple, but the kind of breaking of the 12 episodes is one thing in terms of story. But I think we spent a lot of time going, okay, well, Frances isn't going to tell us all the things she thinks about the breakup with Bobbi, which is this huge, significant shadow that's cast across the whole show. And we need to be able to communicate that without her saying those things. So, there was a lot of work done about kind of keeping the kind of tension between Bobbi and Frances alive whilst the sort of active narrative with Nick and Frances was playing out. So those were some of the challenges, but that was a lot of what the writing team of Alice and Susan and Maeve and Mark were kind of engaged with, and with all the editors very early on, was like, how do we put as much of that internal thinking onto the page?
Lenny, you shared directing duties with Leanne,
yeah,
and you didn't co-direct as such, but you divvied up episodes. So tell us about that, because that's quite an unusual thing for directors to do.
I mean, it does in television. It's more common because just the sort of, there's an awful lot of material. So and just the schedule means sometimes that it would be impossible. You'd need to be in the edit suite at the same time as you were shooting to make it work. But also I think it adds a dimension of, to have another person's sensibility, somebody as great as Leanne in the mix. And suppose for me, like having the privilege of kicking it off and being at the center of the casting and the adaptation process, and having a role across all of them gives me that same feeling of I suppose, just having that connection to the full arc of the show without having to, be behind the camera for every episode. And, I think it worked really well. I feel like it's a really tricky thing for a director to follow on from another director who's been working on the show. And Leanne really does that very well, but she also, there's another dimension that she brings to her episodes that's very much her, and I think the show benefits from hugely.
Was there anything in particular that you desperately wanted to be behind the camera for?
I mean, I quite fancy the trip to Croatia.
You
because because I'd been stuck in Dublin and in lockdown, and we shot in Belfast and for months and months in a studio, and it was like that and also they're great episodes.
Yeah.
They're just such rich episodes, like a little movie. I was keen on that, and I did want to start and end the series. So the way it worked was I did 1 to 5, which gets you to the end of Croatia, and then I did the last 2 episodes as well. So I felt like I had, I got to sort of play across the whole arc of Alison and Joe's characters and everybody else. Yeah.
Alison, you do have so much source material because it's all from the perspective perspective of Frances. So you was, I suppose, the luckiest out of all the cast members in that you had an easier way in. But Frances is a very complex woman. She doesn't give a lot away. So does that make it more challenging when it came to understanding every aspect of her?
I think, yeah, I definitely felt so lucky with that kind of body of work. That was her whole kind of internal monologue throughout the whole story. And so I felt so lucky to have that and was constantly drawing from that. But I think, like, she definitely is a really challenging character and can kind of be in opposition to herself a lot of the time. And I think I definitely felt there's a lot in the book about, you know, like how she grew up and the environment that she grew up in. And I think for me, that really informed a lot of the ways in which she is the way she is and why she really struggles to communicate or, you know, can often be quite defensive or struggle with trust. And I think when you have all of that, like where people kind of come from, and then you see through that book what she's kind of defensive about or what makes her vulnerable, I just really got it. I just really understood why she felt the things she felt and why she was the way she was. So I just tried to, honor that when I was playing her, and because we had so much time, like before we actually started filming, from when I was cast to like when we actually started, we had about 6 months. So like we were all on Zooms and like just talking in depth about the characters themselves and then also the dynamics between them and how we wanted to kind of show that. And because she is a really insular kind of, you know, internal person, I think allowing space for that in the storytelling as well was a big part of it, and that you really are just kind of allowed to sit with these people and just watch them experience things. So yeah, it was kind of like studies of people, which I found really interesting. Yeah.
Did you have like a different perspective on Frances than Alison did? Because were you both coming at it from your characters' perspectives?
Did I feel differently about Frances than Alison did?
Yeah.
Probably. I don't know. I mean, one thing that I was surprised about, I don't know if this will fully answer your question, but when, you know, in playing the character, it was the first time that I'd fully felt there were times, because he's such a closed off character, particularly early on, and he has his cards close to his chest for his own reasons and what he's been through. I felt playing him, particularly early on, that Frances was getting more than she actually was. And it was only watching it back through Frances's point of view, which is obviously the way the show is made, that I felt more of Frances's frustration. Like I could see what she was intrigued by, but I could also see like why she would want to shake him.
Yeah.
But playing him, because I felt like I was him, I thought I was kind of giving her more.
That's the whole story of marriage in one answer.
I was giving him.
Well, I mean, Nick is described as passive numerous times, which is not necessarily a quality that we're used to seeing in our leading men on screen. Is it quite difficult playing somebody who finds emoting so uncomfortable?
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, it was because I feel like he can be lots of different things, but within quite a small bandwidth, and has to be. So I was saying this the other day, like if it's quite like broad brushstrokes, then he has to, on one level, appear to Bobbi as understandably just kind of seeming quiet, reserved, hasn't got much to say for himself, and she quite quickly and easily dismisses him. So that has to be a side that if you're kind of zoomed out, you can understand why. But then if you zoom in, like Frances does, there has to kind of be something shining there or flickering that she would fall into, and that she is kind of both frustrated but fascinated by. And so it was quite like a delicate line to walk along, I found, yeah.
We're going to see our first clip. So just to let you know, there's a warning on this just because it contains scenes of a sexual nature, but you know, you've all seen it, you know what to expect. Let's have a look at our first clip.
Sorry, I'm not, my eyes are watering, that's all.
Frances.
Sorry. It's not real crying, I swear. I'm happy. It sort of happened before when I was with Bobbi. She says it's a symptom of my repressed nature. You can ask her about it. Only please don't ever ask her.
No, I won't.
It's just a physical thing. I feel great. Thank you. Oh my God.
I can't believe we just did that.
Yes, you can. I should probably tell you something. This is kind of awkward.
Go on.
I've never had sex with a man before.
Right.
Is it odd that I didn't tell you beforehand?
No. It's totally up to you.
I was going to, but then I missed the moment. Sorry. I overthink things sometimes.
Makes two of us then.
So Alison really did not know that was coming. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's kind of my fault. I really apologise. It's my favourite scene.
All out there now.
It's a really beautiful scene as well. And what you were saying about the fact that you had so long actually to get to know each other makes a lot of sense when you see that sort of relationship. So tell us about rehearsal, because that's not an easy thing. So much is said and unsaid in that scene. But to get to that point, what needed to happen?
Well, I think, I mean, obviously we would have had, you know, we worked with an intimacy coordinator. So Ita O'Brien,
She's one of the best intimacy coordinators working.
Yeah, I mean, she's kind of
incredible.
covers everything.
Yeah.
She's on, you know, nearly every job that kind of recently that has intimate nature. But so we would have kind of choreographed that scene and knew the kind of blocking and the physicality of it. But I think, like, I guess for Frances, like, she does have a lot of stuff that she represses, and I think for her to be intimate with someone is very kind of, I guess you're unpacking a lot of stuff that she's kind of repressing. And I think with the relationship with Nick, he, I think, makes her feel worthy of love, and he makes her feel special, and I think she's used to not feeling that way. I think she has a really low opinion of herself, and she kind of ranks herself below Bobbi a lot of the time. That I think for someone to kind of care for her in that way and be as kind to her as he is, she just finds really kind of massive and moving, and yeah, it's, as you say, it's kind of born out of loads of just conversations of what that bond means for the two of them, I think.
But it was interesting because when we shot that scene, the first version of it and the version that we'd rehearsed was the crying was you sort of were more inside it. In other words, it was like you weren't telling the truth when you said it was only physical.
Yes.
You could tell, but actually during the shooting of it, that way of doing it with that sort of actual lightness felt better, because it felt like even Frances herself was somehow couldn't quite understand where that was coming from. And that separation between her psychologically and her physically was sort of an important strand in the character.
And it's kind of true of that. There's a lot in the book, and I guess you see in the series as well, of her kind of disconnect to her body, in a sense of like that she isn't in her body a lot, and doesn't really understand a lot of the or kind of wants to shut out a lot of the changes of the different things happening. And so I think when something like that, her first experience with a man, pulls her so into her body, and kind of she just experiences it a whole. It's like a release, it's like an overwhelm, but it was lovely in the way that we kind of ended up finding it in a place of more of a like self-effacing, like kind of oh my god thing, rather than anything kind of to herself.
The other thing I like about that scene is, I feel like is a really nice thing about the dynamic between Nick and Frances, is the sort of openness that Nick lets Frances talk. It's like Frances and Bobbi have this dynamic where they banter and they challenge each other, whereas the space that he gives her is kind of, that's also a sort of new thing for her. And I think in that scene you see it really nicely, that he's just kind of going, just, let it all hang, like pour out. It's nice.
And it's one of, when they're kind of physical together and the spaces around it are one of the few times that they really are able to communicate better. Like often in conversation in a room or around a table, they struggle. I mean, definitely with other people, but between them as well. But like when they are intimate, like they kind of connect in a way they don't otherwise.
We've mentioned Bobbi. We need to talk about Sasha Lane, because she is phenomenal as Bobbi, and such a force of nature throughout the whole series. And my opinion of her changes in every single, not even episode, I think scene, and just the kind of how fluid she is wonderful. So tell us about the casting decision when it came to Sasha.
Well, Lenny and I, we should talk about it together. I mean, we were just looking for somebody who kind of embodied the spirit of Bobbi, but was able to kind of access the depth of Bobbi beyond what Frances could see, and there's a lot in the book that's very abrasive about Bobbi and kind of outspoken, but she's incredibly patient to Frances and her behaviour and her destructive behaviour. So we saw a lot of people, and then we saw Sasha, and it was immediately that she just had this kind of intelligence and maturity that we thought would be really interesting against Alison's Frances. And we did chemistry reads with Sasha and Alison, and it was in Belfast. I couldn't be there, but I saw the tapes afterwards, and just the excitement of the pair of them together was really interesting. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, Lenny, you were there, so you should pick up.
Just absolutely. They like Alison and Sasha just sort of were immediate. You could just tell. I think if we tried to cast anybody else, you would have been like deeply disappointed. There was it was brilliant because Alison's like she can't hide her joy. So I remember I think it was probably when we were reading Jemima Kirk. Mm-hmm. At the end of the scene, Alison just blurted out, "You're amazing." But with Sasha, there's something about, like as Emma said, Bobbi is so patient, and there's something very poignant about that and very moving. I find those scenes, particularly later on, very moving. Mm-hmm. And in the novel, it's something you extrapolate from the novel, but it isn't discussed in the way that, and that's the thing about adaptation. Like the novelist has this scalpel and they can tell you the things they want to tell you and nothing else. Mm-hmm. As soon as you take a camera and put it on something, all of this stuff flows in, all the body language, all the things which might not be described. And so it's a more kind of, it's different. Like it sort of maximizes things, and then you have to pull things out. And I think with Sasha, there's just this kind of mixture of the way she plays Bobbi. There's this mixture of being provocative and challenging and all that stuff, and incredibly kind of just vibrant. But there's also this this love of Frances that you can feel, and that I think was the lovely combination of things that she brought.
Also, I don't want to talk about you, Alison, as if you're not here, but what an incredible first ever performance. That absolutely blew me away. So, Lenny, did you always know that you wanted somebody fresh-faced to play Frances?
We didn't. We had no rule at the beginning because you just don't know. It's always every time you go to cast something, it's an act of faith because you don't know how it's going to go, and yet it's probably the most important. Or those decisions are the most important decisions of the whole thing, and yet you're at the mercy of this process, and so you have to stay open. And because of the success of Normal People, I think a lot of actors were interested in playing both, actually all parts. And so we had a really wonderful, kind of range of people, some very well known. And I think, the thing is, younger actors are less likely to be well known but there are still many people who are established, in their early 20s or whatever. So we were open to that. But I think at the same time, there is just this, like Alison was both the very best person that we saw, just absolutely had Frances from the very beginning in the most amazing way. But it does add something, I think. It's wonderful to be the first show to have Alison in, because, she comes to an audience completely without the baggage of other roles, and just there's something so kind of, and also just it's a very joyful thing, I think, for filmmakers generally, and the rest of the cast even, to be around somebody who's doing their first major role. There's just and when it's as good as it is with Ali, it's just such a, like, everybody is exhilarated by that, and everybody feels part of it, I think, cast and crew.
I love the casting of Tommy Tiernan as your dad.
Oh my God.
That was insane.
I remember me, Lenny and Joe we were doing a rehearsal in Belfast, and Lenny really was like, oh, and Tommy Tiernan's playing the dad, and I literally went, I went so red, because it's just genius casting, and
It's so against type.
it's so, and he's so good, yeah. Like, he really, because I think he does an amazing thing with the role where he kind of plays him a little bit like he's kind of obviously separate to the family, but he's not an animal. Like, he really is struggling, and you see glimmers of him really trying with Frances, and then there's not that connect there, and it's like all of the characters. It's like when you see people step in and embody them, you just see that whole world around them. Then that maybe you don't get as much when you're reading it from one person's perspective, and so. Yeah, sorry, I just got in, but I was so excited about Tommy.
So, in Derry Girls, he's so one thing and wonderful, and then you see him in this, and the range. Joe, I wanted to ask you, because everyone obviously has their own reasons for wanting to join a project, but I know you're a huge fan of Lenny's work, and again, I'm going to talk about you, Lenny, like you're not here, but tell us about why you're so drawn to Lenny's direction in particular.
I'm watching.
I think, well, first and foremost, like right from the off, he was more collaborative than anyone else I've worked with, which isn't a slight on anyone else, but right from being cast at the beginning, he immediately wanted to start talking. This was, a few months before. So you're not turning up on the starting line. You're invited in at the beginning, and he wanted feedback on the character, what was working, what scripts were looking like, and that was quite rare. But really, within all of that, I think he is so incredibly detailed and rigorous in terms of looking at the material and the script and talking about it, kind of beat by beat, as to why each bit that's said or unsaid is there and what it means and how you can improve it and how you can mine it for absolutely everything. I really think that is but never in an overbearing way, never kind of a controlling way that kills the material. Like, I just think the way you interrogate things is so rigorous in the best way that you kind of pull everything from it, always whilst also seeing the whole arc of everything, and the way that things can fit together. It's just amazing to see. And also just being great with actors generally and great with people generally and being so kind and funny. It's just a joy.
Yeah. It's interesting what you were saying about the sort of mining every ounce of information, because when we talked last time, and Jemima, who plays Melissa, was talking about, she was often mainly going from the letter in the book. She didn't have a huge amount else to go on. And as I guess the ripple effect of, Bobbi has, I guess, the most after Frances, and then I guess Nick. So for you, Joe, what were the kind of grounding moments of finding Nick in the pages? What always brought you back to essence of him?
I mean, I felt like I know it's Frances's point of view, and of course you then turn it around and kind of flesh it out, but I feel like with all of them, you get a very strong impression from the book. Of course, things are turned more 3D, but I suppose really thinking about his story before you meet him at the beginning, you don't know why he is the way he kind of behaves until a lot later on. And that forms a big part of who he is as a character. So he's been through this kind of storm, and you meet him at the beginning when he's in a place of recovery, and is has very low self-worth, doesn't feel kind of loved or capable of loving, but you don't find that out until a lot later. And I suppose, that's the kind of crux of who he is when you meet him. And it's only really through meeting Frances that she kind of teases him back to life, and they kind of help each other heal in a way.
It's so intangible, I suppose, all of their relationships with each other, and I guess all relationships are, but why do you think they connect on a level that him and Melissa have never been able to reach?
I think him and Melissa are able to connect and did connect, but it's just kind of become frozen and like stagnated and sort of died a bit. But I think with the two of them, I think they're quite similar in some ways. And obviously normally, opposites attract, but I think they are quite similar, and they're both used to being defined by these quite outspoken people next to them. And that's not what makes them kind of like each other, but it's what initially pulls them together, and they're kind of left alone in this pool as two quite similar like humans. I think, I don't know, it's hard like exactly what it is. I think it is about, for him, I suppose he's very, very low. I don't think he feels like he can make someone happy or that he can really be loved. I don't know, they kind of just like unlock that simultaneously in the other.
It changes as well, doesn't it? Because kind of what happens initially, the sort of passivity is quite empowering for Frances. Yeah. And she doesn't totally take it seriously as a potential love match. It's just, I think very early on, it's a bit of an experiment, even though there is this, there is an undoubted attraction. And then it's as she gets further into the series and she realizes actually the feelings are now manifesting as jealousy and love and lust. It's like, oh, I am really drawn to this person, and the similarities are kind of really throwing me out of whack, and that's really disturbing to her. So in terms of like the kind of beats of a love story, it's quite unpredictable and odd. Do you know? It's not a like, God, you're so great, you're so great.
It's full of miscommunication. Like particularly early on, they constantly getting the other one wrong. That's also kind of why they fall apart at one point, by not being able to know what they feel, let alone explain it. So they kind of are fully synced, but also are unable to kind of understand why or say why.
By embarking on the affair, I felt like initially, like it kind of puts them in this bond with each other in a sense of like, for such a long time, they're the only two people who know about it. And so it's like, even that kind of ties you to a person. I used to find a little bit that there's this shared thing that only they have with each other. And when they kind of re-find each other again in Croatia, it's that developing of like, there's that thing between us that no one else knows about. And I think like, everything that you were saying, like I think they just, I don't know, there's this kind of deeper understanding, even though they miscommunicate and even though they struggle a little bit with each other, like I just feel like there's this kind of deep understanding or a recognition of like maybe their position in the world or how they might feel about themselves. I think they can kind of see in each other.
It's also, the whole story is profoundly unconventional, which is like appropriate for the things that Sally's exploring. In fact, they sort of reverse into this love affair. Like so the normal thing is intense, kind of overwhelming attraction, and then you watch that play out through all the complications of a love story. That's the kind of normal shape. But actually, if you even think about what's going on when Frances turns her attention to Nick, she is intrigued by him. There is something initially quite, cheesy about her, kind of like this. Even let's look this guy up, and you look at him, and he's kind of good looking and interesting, and that's that's quite sort of that's not a very profound falling in love. And then one of the she's intrigued by how quiet he is, and that when she does kind of look and see who this quiet person is, there's something there that shows there's a real intelligence and a charisma buried deeply, which is quite intriguing to her. But also she's at that moment quite jealous of the potential relationship between Melissa and Bobbi, or the fact that Melissa appears to be more interested in Bobbi, and Frances has a very, very big ego. And so actually her motivation for kind of saying, I should see it, I should come and see the play, they're quite cloudy. And why I like this story so much is because out of that messiness, in which her motivations are not, it's not like pure or very honorable, actually. Out of that comes real love, and that's much more like real life than the conventional love story, because in real life it's always a bit messy, and actually it's a whole series of odd maneuvers and shifts and happenstances that actually end up creating lasting relationships.
And manipulations.
Yeah.
Right. Let's take a look at another clip. This is in Croatia. I promise it's not a sex scene. And this has got a bit more of Melissa in. Let's have a look.
It was kind of, and then you have like a shock to expand. I mean, this is not like a good thing. I think that wasn't, but I think we're getting somewhere here.
I know.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi. Good sleep?
Yeah.
Wine?
Sure. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Cheers, everyone. Nick?
Yes.
This looks nice. Yeah? Give me some of that. Thanks. I'm sorry for being a brat earlier. About the lemons.
You're forgiven.
Could you give me a hand with something in the kitchen?
Sure.
Okay. See you later.
Bye.
You grab it.
What were you two talking about?
Nothing much. He's funny. He didn't mention you, if that's what you were wondering.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure he's in love with his wife. So.
People can be in love and have meaningful relationships. It's not some kind of finite resource.
Yeah, but wouldn't it depress you to sleep with someone who loves someone else?
Not if they love me too.
Emma, just in that alone, I think my loyalties shift. I see this woman in an apron who's been cooking for these people who are just sitting around getting drunk and not helping, and I just suddenly, all my empathy goes with Melissa. So, but tell us about the importance of having characters that aren't always likeable all the way through.
Well, they're the best characters, aren't they? I mean, I think that there's a lot of people talk about why Sally's work so popular, or, why she's so intriguing to people as a novelist. And I think there are many reasons, but I think one of them is that people really connect with the characters and the sort of unpredictability of the characters. And, you see it in at various different times in the show. The characters can do wonderfully charming and intriguing things, and then they can do horribly destructive or narcissistic things. And I think that most people can connect with that on some level. You look at, Melissa in Croatia with the lemons, I'm just like, oh my God, I've been that person. You find yourself in it, and it's very reassuring to be like, oh, that's You know, you can. I think that's the exciting thing about storytelling, isn't it? Is like the most unpredictable, the most like real life you can get the characters to be, then the most you have the potential to reveal in the story. So, if they were all nice, it would be incredibly boring.
There's also something in that clip that I love, which is just like there's an awful lot floating in the air, and if you think about like two great moments of performance from both Joe and from Alison, it's been after the sort of that morning, you know, Alison or Frances learns that from Nick that he's still in love with Melissa, and he says it in a way which is not, you know, it's in response to a question, and there could be more clarification, but there isn't time. And she's very taken aback by that and closes a bit. And I think we play it more, like we play a little less on the kind of anger and resentment than in the book. We play more on a kind of sense of foolishness and sadness on her part. And then she goes for this sleep, and when Bobbi said a good sleep, feeling better, I think she says. Alison's is really good, because what it says is, yes, I know I was in this state, and thank you, I have kind of reset. And that's all in that, And then she watches the hand holding of Melissa and Nick with a kind of, with an appropriate sadness, but it's not played out like we feel it with the camera, but it's not played out as a kind of disapproval, and it's all very subtle. And Joe's yes when she hears Nick is so brilliant, because it's like that's every man's yes when they've been caught not doing the thing that they were supposed to be doing, and they're like ready to be super polite and at their service, you know. But it's all in that tiny stuff. It's all in that. Yeah.
How does the move to Croatia and the shift sort of affect the characters, do you think, Lenny? Like what is the impact on their freedoms and their relationships? And
I mean, I suppose some of it is sort of, you know, like how stories work. So from a storytelling point of view, that shift in location to a closed, effectively like a single location, even though they do go outside it a little bit, just is a sort of like an indication to an audience that you're in a sort of play within a play-ish, you know. And there is, and I think two things have shifted. Nick is out the other side of this job he did in Scotland, which he didn't enjoy, and he is quite a different Nick to the Nick that we met in episode 1, 2, and 3. Mm-hmm. And when Frances arrives and she sees him, she just, you know, all of her kind of sense of, you know, of being sort of in charge of her feelings is sort of broken immediately. And I think just the intensity of proximity and heat and that kind of, that intoxication of being away, it just plays really beautifully into the kind of, and what you see over the course of those 2 episodes actually is Frances going, I can't just play with this. This is really serious. There is a person here who has an existing relationship, I'm in an adult world. And it's like by the end of episode 5, she's effectively thinking, yes, I'm prepared to actually try to do this in some way that would have been impossible in a previous episode. And then Bobbi comes in.
What about for you both? I mean, I know you're working and then you're still working in Croatia, but presumably there must be some sort of mental shift when the weather is beautiful and you have the scenery that's so gorgeous. So does that actually affect the way that you approach every day?
I think so. Like, I remember, because it was at the end of the shoot, we went there for a month at the end, and I remember me and Joe were sitting next to each other on the plane over, and I was like, I really don't know these episodes very well. I was like, I have a lot of work and stuff. But there was this kind of like looseness. I felt the way that and I remember that our first rehearsal, like when we were at the Cove, and we were talking about, you know, just approaching a kind of a looser way with the scenes of like being able to move and not being kind of like constrained to continuity, or like, you know, all those things, just having that kind of holiday feel almost kind of embedded in the performances in a sense. And that actually really helped, I felt. And that those, I think, are my favorite episodes, because I think, you know, everyone's there and you really see kind of the journeys that everyone's going on and the different things that they're struggling with and that they're enjoying. And I always think there's something really interesting in watching group scenes, or, you know, because actually you can play so much more in those little moments, you know, on like a look between people at the table or whatever. So yeah, I think that kind of really helped actually.
Yeah, I feel the same. I mean, I remember thinking that I don't know these episodes well at all. I'd be really worried.
Written until quite late.
But I think it was that like looseness, and also not that there aren't like great one-on-one conversation scenes in it, but we come out of 3 episodes before that are full of quite heavy, almost claustrophobic at times, inside bedrooms, big conversations, and suddenly just to be like in the sun, in the heat with a group, and everything starts to kind of cook in like a group setting. It felt very, very different. And it was the last month of shooting. So I think everything was just there already. And there was a real like sense of relaxation to it, which was really nice.
And that comes through, I think, in those scenes. They're a real pleasure, you know, you want to be there with them, which you don't always when they're having those deep and dark conversations.
There was the villa that we shot in was on top of a mountain, and the last week, which was all the night shoots, the weather changed, it got really cold and it started thunder and lightning. It was really, we had to keep stopping and starting shooting for safety. But one thing that I don't even know if you guys know this, but there's a scene in one of the episodes, a nighttime dinner scene with Kerry Fox in it as well. And it's quite tense. Yeah. And there's a tree by the table, right? And there was an enormous rat which kept running up and down the tree. And myself and Susie Lavelle, the DP, and Sean, the first AD, and everybody were going, what do we do about the rat? And the rat was stealing things like from, you know, whatever bits of scraps had gone. And we thought, I think all of our thought was Jemima would go ballistic. So we just said, and we had these terrible thoughts, what if it just lands in the middle of the table in the middle of a shot? So I'm telling you this for the first time.
We had a rat. Did Leanne ever tell you about this? So there was, at the very end of episode 10, when Bobbi and Frances go outside the bar and they have that moment together. At the beginning of that scene, or I don't know if we were tight for time or something like that. Did I tell you about this? So we were doing the scene and we just saw this rat coming towards us, and it was circling around our feet. But really, oddly enough, we just didn't stop. Like, we just kept going because we were like, I think it'll be fine. Like, it was almost like we were communicating through our eyes of like, let's just keep going because I think the scene's going well. So let's keep going.
There's the other animal stories. There's a scene at the end which and actually Ali is standing beside this lake, right? And Susie Lavelle, the DP, is a handheld shot. And this swan drifts over and starts chewing at her foot and her leg. And it was a really, really great take. And we knew that this was like potentially, you know, one of the more important shots of the show. And Susie, to her absolute credit, just kept, you know, and they're really strong. It could have sort of pulled her in, camera and all. But this swan was like totally felt invaded by the film crew.
Love that. I really want to talk, Emma, about the music, and can we just do a quick who has got to the end of Conversations with Friends? Because I don't. Okay, quite a lot of you. So are we okay to talk about the ending? Would anyone be devastated if we talked about the ending if you haven't seen it? I think we can talk about the ending, right? But just in not quite yet, but just in terms of the music, Phoebe Bridgers wrote a song for Conversations, which we hear in the final episode, I think. It's really lovely. Tell us about getting her involved, because as if this couldn't get any cooler, this show.
Yeah, no, it was a brilliant idea, and we can't take credit for it. It was Hulu's idea. There was a really great member of the marketing team at Hulu called Courtney, who's just a huge fan of the book, a huge fan of Sally Rooney, a huge fan of Phoebe Bridgers, and she just and she's really felt like Phoebe would be the right person to request the possibility of writing a song for the show. So they said, we were thinking of doing this. What do you think? And we all thought, fab, work away. If you're paying. And that was, that was, go for it.
Producer.
So they went and spoke to Phoebe, and she's a huge fan of the book, and we had a call with her, and she talked about all the things she loved about the book, and there was various kind of conversations, but she had a song in mind. And then I think a sort of couple of months passed, and we didn't know where it was going to go in the show, and we were actually getting quite close to finishing the show. And so it was clear that it sort of had to go in the final episode, because we'd been finishing off all the other episodes. So I think, Lenny, you kind of heard it first, and suddenly it was this moment of going, oh, wow, this is a brilliant piece of music. And then the question sort of arose of where to place it, and I guess...
Well, it was, so we work very closely with a brilliant editor called Nathan Nugent. He's also a massive music fan and a big part of the creative team, but he's always, so a lot of tracks that you end up hearing, along with Juliet Martin, who's a music supervisor, and myself, because I love music as well. Lots of people will throw tracks. Emma will throw tracks out, but Nathan he's just so good at music to picture. So that idea of using the track for Bobbi and Frances, and to try and anchor that relationship as just absolutely central to Frances's kind of self, to use it there and then reprise it at the end. That was Nathan, and it worked really well. And then you have all these wonderful tracks and lots of Irish artists, actually something we've done across both series. And then Stephen Rennicks, who's I've collaborated with on absolutely everything that I've done. He did the sort of original music, which kind of weaves thematically a lot of the elements together across the series. So yeah.
It's just really, really gorgeous. We're going to show a clip from episode 11 now. If you haven't seen it, sorry. You had a week. Let's have a look at the clip.
Hey. Do you want coffee? Did you have a good night?
Melissa showed me your story.
What? How?
Were you going to tell me?
I'm sorry.
I heard you're getting good money for it.
Yeah?
Fuck you.
I actually need the money. I realize that's like an alien concept
So
to you.
fuck morals and friendship and honesty then.
That's not what I meant.
She belongs everywhere. She never seems to be serious nor joking. She can be unrestrained, abrasive. She breaks things and treats people, men, with contempt. And whatever she wants, she can have.
It's fiction.
So why couldn't you show it to me then? What is wrong with you?
I'm sorry.
I don't think you think anyone else is real, Frances. Standing in front of all those people at that party all fucking wounded, kissing me, and then writing this shit instead of communicating anything. Even now you can't. Your self-obsession is exhausting, and it's hurtful, and it's fucking boring. Sometimes when I'm doing something dull, like walking home from college or hanging up laundry, I like to imagine that I am her. Her wrists are slender, and she has long, elegant hands. She has better posture than I do and a memorably beautiful face. I find myself believing that if I looked like her, then nothing bad would ever happen to me. It's so fucking dehumanizing. I mean, fuck, Frances. Is that really how you see me? Like my only role is to move effortlessly through the world in contrast to poor fucking you? I don't think I can be your friend anymore. I don't want you in my life.
such a good scene. It's so horrible and tense and necessary at the same time. How do you approach those arguments? How did you and Sasha kind of work together to keep that so electric?
I remember we actually rehearsed this quite a bit, didn't we? I think there was a couple of rewrites of this scene because it felt like for both of them actually a massive turning point, and a real kind of reveal and honesty about actually so much of the stuff that Bobbi's had to put up with for so long. And so I think definitely for Bobbi it feels like she's you know, bit her tongue so many times, and to finally go, like, I'm not putting up with this anymore for myself, actually felt really massive and important for her. And so, like, I think, you know, for Frances, I think we talked a lot about how she does have that defense, and she always kind of feels the need to protect herself from criticism, or to protect herself from kind of being made lesser than she already feels. But I think with this, it's like, you know, what Bobbi says is word. Like, it's got, like, that Bobbi is kind of everything to her. And so for her to say these things to her, I think is complete rock bottom. And losing Bobbi actually is kind of the anchor that I think drives breaking up with Nick, because I don't think she knows how to be a person without Bobbi. And so I think we talked a lot about how embarrassing it would feel to have that read out in front of her, and how much it kind of just reveals to her in that moment of, oh my God, I completely have kind of dehumanized her in so many ways, or kind of, as she's saying, treated me like some sort of idea rather than a living, breathing person with thoughts and feelings just like you. And so I think it's a massive kind of, you know, realization in a sense, and a kind of a downfall, and also for Bobbi, just a moment to really just kind of, you know, stand her ground and say all the things that she's been feeling but swallowing for quite a lot of time during this time that they've been having. But yeah, I think we spent like nearly a full day on this scene.
Also, just to say, it was shot, I think, at the end of the first week of the shoot.
First week, yeah.
So like we were only just beginning the process, but like it's the nature of production that you shoot out locations. This is a set, but we you know, you shoot out the biggest scenes, you shoot out the sets one by one, and so you're having to jump forward to the end, you know, to close to the end of 6 hours of material. So for the actors, that's such a kind of thing to get yourself into that before you've shot any of the material that leads up to it. But it just is a testament to the quality of the kind of creative partnership you had with Sasha, that you were both able to find that so early in the process.
Joe, if you're watching a scene like that, because if you think about the conversations that Nick and Frances have, the pacing is so different than between the scenes between Frances and Bobbi. So how did you kind of approach the much slower, the the sorries, the pauses, without feeling like you were losing momentum of the conversation?
I guess just by knowing or trying to work out what was in the space in between, so that it didn't hopefully just become a pause, that it didn't have kind of any meaning. Obviously, yeah, seeing that, it's funny because there aren't scenes like that between the two of them, and there's miscommunication in both pairs, but that happen in different ways and are driven in different ways. And obviously with these two, they are the quieter, introverted ones, and so there isn't one of them tending to kind of spark it or kind of push it out of the other. But with, I think hopefully, so that it didn't turn into just a series of quiet spaces. It was about really interrogating, like I said before, like with Lenny and Leanne, what was felt underneath, even if it couldn't come through. And so hopefully that's kind of infused in it.
I think that's also felt in the camera movement, right, Lenny? Because you keep expecting these to be static shots.
Yeah.
And none of them are.
Yeah.
There's always this sort of bobbing and weaving and shifting. And
I mean, I have to give huge credit to Susie Lavelle, and actually to Bobby Shore, who was Leanne's DP. But Susie is a particularly gifted operator, I think. She just has this kind of, we shot a lot of handheld, but it's not gratuitously sort of announcing itself. It's just that what it allows you to do is to sort of move to adjust tiny amounts with the character, and what that's not just because it's a nice framing. It's because it kind of oddly, like subconsciously, for an audience, makes you feel that it's an attitude of attention, you know, like of really close attention. And I think that's what we were trying to do. So never kind of unmotivated camera movement, but a live camera that felt like it was really trying to see what was happening, you know, really quite close to the performers. And we did vary that depending on what was happening in the scene. And there are some, you know, sort of conventionally grip shots and the very occasional, and some Steadicam and stuff like that as well. But yeah, I think that idea of those spaces, I think what the show does, and it's like, it won't be for everybody, but you have to really, if you're drawn into the characters in a sort of really deep way, and you really feel for them and you really attend to them, then I believe there is something to be found in every pause. There is a tension there and a thing to watch. But of course, if you're looking for plot in those moments, you won't find it. And I totally get that. You know, it's not everybody's going to love that mode of storytelling. But I think in a world of like super fast storytelling, it's just nice to be able to like do this and to do something which is kind of I hope intelligent and kind of invites people to be present with the characters.
Emma, let's just really briefly talk about the ending, because it did have me screaming at the TV, like at the edge of a precipice. Oh my God, what? So what
happened though, right?
I had read the book years ago and had forgotten the very...
Oh, lovely.
So it was really brilliant and a shock. So tell us, just remind us what happens in that last bit, and why you think that sort of ending works so well for this particular series.
Yes. Well, so obviously it is the ending of the book, which is that towards the end of episode 12, sorry for those of you maybe who haven't read the book, but here we go. Frances makes her peace with Bobbi and gets back together with Bobbi in a kind of open relationship that is sexual and loving. And so, but there are no kind of defined terms about what that relationship is. Bobbi doesn't want to put a label on it. And that is kind of existing and is happily going on when Frances receives an unexpectedly kind of accidental call from Nick. And that begins a kind of conversation with them, and they haven't spoken since they broke up. And that conversation is a sort of moment of Frances being more honest about what had been going on for her when they broke up. And I think kind of what we sort of hoped was happening across episode 12 was you sort of seeing kind of Frances facing up to her responsibilities slightly, that she has impacted on other people's lives. It hasn't just all been an event of her own existence, and that, you know, she just hasn't been the victim of other people's actions. She has hurt people. And so the kind of honesty across that episode, what you hope for at the end when she says, "Nick, come and get me," is that Frances is sort of entering a phase of her life where she's going to act, and she's going to act with a sense that it has, you know, there's going to be repercussions. But for me, that's not about her going, "Nick, I love you, let's get together and be everything." It's like, Bobbi's in my life. I think I want you in my life as well. Don't really know what that means, but rather than like agonize about it, I'm going to say, "Come and get me." And so it's about a new phase of her just trying to be kind of a little bit more grown up. But for me, it's not a choice between one or the other. It's about, you know, being open to both. But I think that's what we intended for it, but it won't be how everybody reads it, because some people will be like, "Oh, she's back together with Nick then." But that was, you know, I think that's the intention of Sally's book, is that it's about an opening up rather than a kind of everything would be linear. Yeah.
Did you all sort of feel the same, or were there arguments about what that ending actually meant?
I think we felt pretty similar. It didn't feel finite to me. Like, it felt like a nice continuation of everything that Sally had been talking about, and Frances making that decision. Like, there was like a joy in the acceptance of like the complexity of it, rather than agonizing like she had before, because she's come to a place where you can love more than one person, and choosing one doesn't mean that she can't want or have the other. And so it just felt like a kind of continuation and something in motion rather than I'm landing on this person.
Yeah, we talked about that a bit, about how it like, it would almost feel too easy to put everyone back in their couples again, and that actually it's so in the heart of the story. It's that, like you can't, it's she does love both of these people, and actually in a sense the emotion of that is incredibly simple. I love these people, but it's all of the messaging around that and the kind of, the structures that we put in place of, our definition of what a relationship should be is what makes it so complex. And it's kind of a feeling of her just going, I accept, I can see now what I'm in. And like there's a lovely scene, I've talked about this a few times, but with her mother, Justine Mitchell, who plays Paula, and she says some just before, or maybe a scene or two before, and she just says to her, like, in life you can just make decisions and hope, and that's all you can do. And I always feel like that really rang true of that scene of like, I can't try and control everything all the time, and actually I just have these feelings, and I think I'm just gonna be free with that a little bit, and whatever that means, we don't know. He could say no if she says come and get me. So like you never know. But
Just get some wine.
yeah.